Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Thomas Reutman. I'm a hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk of this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterward through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. As this is a virtual hearing, there's no sign-in sheet, so if you'd like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice. If you do not have that with you, please contact the Bureau of Urban Forestry at urbanforestry@sfdpw.org. This public is being held to consider 3 items. First is public comment, where members of the public may address the hearing officer on matters that are within the department's jurisdiction but not on today's agenda. Next will be hearing order 211488 to consider an appeal to the fine issued for failure to protect one street tree during construction adjacent to 817 Lion Street. The fine issued is $25.20. And last will be hearing order 211489 to consider an appeal for the illegal removal of one significant tree on the property of 801 Sanchez Street. The fine issued is $10,000. My job as the hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the director. The director will make the final determinations. When the director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them if you have provided contact information. The hearing will proceed as follows for the 2 cases. I'll ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I'll allow the property owner, applicant, or appellant to speak. Then any members of the public or witness who wants to speak. And then the department, if the department would like to address any comments. And then if I feel it's warranted, I'll allow an opportunity for further clarification by the appellant. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left. If you are a party to this proceeding, I will call on you to speak. If you'd like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let us know before you speak. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. If you're a member of the public or witness who wants to speak, wait for me to call for public comments and then use the Zoom's raise your hand feature to put yourself in the queue to speak. If you've dialed in by phone, raise your hand by pressing *9, and when told you are being unmuted, press *6 to unmute yourself before speaking. When it is your turn to speak, I will recognize you. Again, if you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. Comments and questions should be addressed to me and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. We'll now begin the hearing. So we'll start with whether there's any matters that are in Public Works purview but not on the March 19th agenda.
I don't see any hands, Mr. Reutman.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move to the first order, which is hearing order 211488 at 817 Lion Street, and I'll ask Public Works to make its presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Buck. I am the urban forester for San Francisco Public Works Bureau of Urban Forestry, and just wanted to be on camera here for a few minutes before I turn it over to our PowerPoint, which will contain a lot of information. What we'll do for today's hearing, we have 2 items to review, and both items involve San Francisco's Urban Forestry Ordinance, Article 16 of the Public Works Code. And so we do want to take a little bit of a deep dive into the basis for why we issued these administrative fines, get into that, and then we finally move on to the actual specifics of the 2 cases. So I do appreciate everyone's patience as we work through the code, but obviously it's important. It's why we're here this morning. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And sometimes this takes a moment, and sometimes I do pretty well with it. So let's see. Here we go. Let's view from beginning. My goodness, that was a record time. Cerise, this looks visible to you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, record time. So thank you again, everyone. So just stepping back, San Francisco has an urban forestry ordinance, and as do pretty much most cities and towns in the country. And each ordinance may be different going from city to city. These ordinances are, you know, quite their own creation and often reflect local values and or political histories. So each city has its own ordinance, and it may vary from city to city, town to town. Our code is Article 16 of the Public Works Code. So we have a few sections we'll highlight. The first one that we just wish to highlight is Section 808, which is protection of trees and landscape material. And it states that injury to or destruction of trees is prohibited. It shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally, maliciously, or through gross negligence injure or destroy a street tree or any tree on city property, a significant tree or a landmark tree. In addition to the penalties set forth, the director may require any person who removes or destroys a tree in violation of the provisions of this article to pay for each tree removed or destroyed a sum of $10,000 or the tree's replacement value, whichever is greater, which means the minimum fine would be $10,000. The director may require any person who injures a tree in violation of the provisions of this Article 16 to pay a sum of money equal to the diminishment of the tree's value as set forth in the current edition of the Guide for Plan Appraisal, Council of Tree and Landscape Appraisers. Where an abutting property owner removed a street tree or trees, meaning significant trees, without obtaining a permit, the department shall require that the property owner plant a replacement street tree or trees with total diameter 6 inches above ground that is equal to or greater than the total diameter of the street tree or trees that were removed without a permit. Regarding Section 806, there's additional information about the permitted planting and removal of street trees. Under removal, an abutting property owner who desires a permit to remove a street tree or a significant tree shall apply to the department on a designated form. We may grant or deny that in accordance with the following procedures and requirements. When we're looking at permitted trees for removal, the department grants a tree removal permit. We require that a street tree or trees of equivalent replacement value to the one removed be planted in place of the removed tree or impose an in lieu fee. That's an important distinction. When it's permitted with a proper permit, it's not trunk diameter, it's value. And so if you had a dead tree, the value would be 0 because there's no perceived value. There would just be liability only. For an illegal removal of a dead tree, it's not about value. It's actually replacement trunk, 6 inches above grade. So the penalty for removing a tree without a permit is very, very severe. It's not just the financial penalty, it's the replacement requirements, which can be even more onerous than the administrative fine. Getting back to construction work, protection of trees is required. The code states that it shall be unlawful for any person to engage in any construction work on private or public property without first taking steps to protect street trees, significant trees, and landmark trees from damage, including damage caused by a number of different things, including soil compaction or contamination, excavation, placement of concrete or other pavement or foundation material. If excavation, construction, or street tree work is planned within the drip line of a significant tree, a landmark tree, or a tree on any street or other publicly owned property, said tree or trees shall be adequately protected. If any construction work results in the injury or damage to such trees, the responsible party or parties may be subject to the penalties set forth in section 811 of this article. A couple of other items to note about protection of trees in section 808. This number 2, prior to Department of Building Inspection issuance of a building permit or site permit, the applicant for a project may damage one or more street trees, significant trees, or landmark trees shall submit a tree protection plan to the director for review and approval. Under 7, an applicant or permittee's failure to obtain a director-approved tree protection plan pursuant to these sections shall be deemed in violation of the subject permit. And then highlighted in red, just to emphasize, the director may enforce such a violation under the terms of the relevant public works permit, including a requirement that all work stop until the applicant or permittee complies with this section. There's some additional information here. In the case of a Department of Building Inspection building or site permit, the director shall request the Director of Building Inspection to initiate an enforcement action under the building code, including a requirement that all work stop until the applicant or permittee complies with this section. Section 802 defines how a tree may be injured or what an injury may include. Sometimes we emphasize this when we've issued a fine for excessive pruning. In this case, we don't have such a case, but it is interesting that there's quite a number of ways in which trees may be impacted or damaged. And there's some really obvious things like impact or cutting, carving, painting, transplanting, knocking over. But it also may include injurious attachment of a rope, wire, nail, advertising poster, or other contrivance to any tree subject to the provisions of this article. Soils and substances that's harmful to a tree to come into contact with a tree, no setting fire to trees or allowing fires to burn, and then pruning, which in and of itself may kill or cause the tree to decline, severing of all or part of a tree. We outline the administrative penalties. Basically, it states, this is a bit of a repeat, but the minimum fine amount for a tree that's been removed without a permit or destroyed is $10,000, or the appraised value, whichever is greater. And the second paragraph is not related to any cases that we have today. Quick summary as we wrap up before we get into the case details. It goes without saying that trees are more than just beautiful additions to urban life. They are essential components of the city's ecosystem and provide enormous environmental and social benefits. A permit is required to remove any street tree, significant tree, or landmark tree. It's illegal to injure a tree. Injuries can include excessive pruning, nailing objects to trees, or vehicular accidents. An illegal removal of a tree requires replacement with equivalent inches in total diameter of the street tree or trees that were removed. And the last one is just kind of an obvious statement about sometimes property owner may not be aware of what the rules are, but it's still required. Regarding tree protection, we do have some best management practices. Some of this is stamped on plans or available on our website. This is just a visual of what tree protection would look like. Here's some visuals of tree protection in action. The idea is we're just showing the public that we are aware that there are trees here. We're heightening their visibility for both the public and for people performing that work, to remind everyone that we're going to be careful when we work around street trees or other protected trees. There's a number of ways to determine an appropriate area for tree protection. Obviously, in an urban environment, we might be limited in how much of the public right-of-way is within a protection zone. There's a number of things that relate to tree protection, such as not stockpiling materials within a protection zone, no piling mulch or soil against the trunk, and no compaction of soil with equipment, vehicles, material storage, and/or foot traffic. This is regarding pruning, so we'll skip that, and we'll skip pruning. One thing to state is that as of July 1st, 2017, Public Works now maintains all of the trees in the public right-of-way, and young trees that may be planted due to construction will eventually become the maintenance responsibility of Public Works. And this just shows that we have a strategic and systematic approach to maintaining all of the street trees in the public right-of-way. Thank you again for your patience, and we now move into the specific case, order number 211-488, which is the subject site is 817 Lion Street, to consider an appeal for the failure to protect one street tree during construction. The fine that was issued by staff is $2,520. Here's a photo of the subject tree at the address, just showing that there's no protection in place. And just to clarify, there could be confusion in general, that the staking, the existing staking that we use for establishing young trees is not the protection. This is just what is keeping the tree growing straight during establishment. How this came to light is that our urban forestry inspector, Allegra Mautner, was working with the applicant, and within correspondence from the applicant, photos were exchanged and shared. And when Allegra saw this photo, she immediately had reason to be very concerned. And so this is how it came to our attention. The applicant sent photos of tree with construction debris piled against the trunk within the critical root zone with no tree protection in place. So this for us, just to kind of be clear, this for us would be, there are cases when there might be a warning, like this pile is next to the tree basin, but not piled in the tree basin. A tree that's this young, that has this type of debris in the basin coming into contact with the trunk and the support stakes, we'll always issue a fine for this. And again, we're going to be very fair and reasonable and have a very reasonable discussion today. We'll definitely explain how responsive our contact with the property has been since receiving this fine. I do want to emphasize that, but this is pretty much always going to warrant a fine. I think the discussion today may focus on whether or not the tree was damaged during this, but there's a failure to protect. And here's an example. You might get cited for not wearing a seatbelt. And all joking aside, you don't need to go through the windshield in an accident to be cited, right? The idea is to prevent someone from going through the windshield. We want to prevent trees from being damaged or even coming close to being damaged. And for us, it's really difficult to establish trees and keep them safe when they're young. There's tremendous pressure on all city departments to keep the right-of-way safe and clean. And some things we may not be able to control sociologically, but this is something that is in the city's and contractors' control to avoid. It does damage to the ability of Public Works to maintain the public trust that we are able to protect trees and the urban forest. And so that's why we take this very seriously. Again, just showing the pile of debris coming in contact with the base of the trunk of the tree. And clearly construction actively taking place both in the property and the roadway. Again, there was some discussion about like, well, what were the damages here? Again, a failure to protect may or may not include like, was the tree snapped in half? In this case, the piling of the debris, yeah, it caused some soil compaction, not severe, but it shows that these weighted blocks of concrete created some compaction. And it did come in contact with the trunk. Is this a big injury? No, no. This is not a big injury. But you know, if we're going to debate whether a tree was damaged or not, I just got to point out that we need trees to be protected so that the public walks by a site and they feel confident that resources like streetlights and street trees are all protected. So this is a very straightforward case for us. Our inspector, when they come across a photo like this, even when it's provided by the customer who we're here to help provide service to, we do have to issue a fine when we see something like this. So again, I just want to repeat that to be consistent with how we handled similar cases, Allegra did issue the fine for failure to protect the tree during construction. We can have a discussion about what those impacts were, but it's still a failure to protect a tree prior to construction. That said, I can state with certainty that I don't believe those impacts are going to have any serious impact to the tree moving forward. And we will emphasize here how responsive, very responsive, the customer's been the moment they received that citation. They did work with Allegra to remove the debris immediately, and then we worked through what tree protection would be adequate for the site. And I know in our files we have a photo of the protection now in place. So I do want to thank the customer who we've been in touch with quite a bit for their responsiveness. They're taking it very seriously. We respect that and appreciate that, and hopefully we can just have a reasonable discussion. I do think this tree is going to be fine moving forward, but we did have to issue that fine. So that concludes our staff presentation for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Before we hear from the appellant, I just wanted to get one clarification. You mentioned that the inspector was working with the property owner. Was that as part of the pre-construction activity to look at that tree or permitting, or was that done after this this concrete? Like how did that transpire that the inspector was involved at that site?
Sure. The building permit and tree planting requirement or tree protection was triggered with the construction, with what was going on in property. That often will happen before a project gets going, but sometimes that process happens in parallel. So I would say it was a pretty routine review of the application, and there are times when we join in with an applicant who's kind of already in their building permit process. So in this particular case, I would say it was kind of in process already, not unusual. I can state there was no warning from us like a year before, or no earlier contact or interactions with the customer that were negative in any way. We basically joined together like, hey, what I'm doing on site, building tells me is going to require tree planting and or protection. This is what we have going on. Here's photos of the current site. We have an existing tree, so I don't have to plant one, right? So it was that discussion about what the requirements would be for that site. I will note that when the project was initiated, there were no street trees out front. So the early review of their permit, there were no street trees to protect. So again, we're here to support the customer. And like, we're not here to say that they did a number of terrible things. They did not. It's just that when we came on site and we got involved with their permit review, construction was taking place. This young street tree had been planted about a year, maybe a year or two before that photo was taken. So again, to your question, it's a great question. The original application was initiated and there were no existing street trees that required protection at that time.
See, so the tree was planted sometime between the initial permit application, which would have triggered the tree protection, and when the actual construction started. So then when the construction started, there was no tree protection because it wasn't required by permit initially.
The specific permit review did not catch that. The default ordinance, though, just to gently remind everyone, our ordinance, regardless of construction permits, anything that has the potential to impact a street tree, like tree protection is required. So if you're gonna move, you know, and you're gonna do something with equipment and storage material, you're required to protect trees. So there's always a standing requirement to protect trees. So I just want to gently remind folks on that. But you have the sequence. You have an understanding of that. You're right that the initial review, when they submitted their application to building inspection, there were no existing trees to protect, and we just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Is the appellant present?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you state
Okay.
your name too before you give your testimony, please?
Absolutely. Just a minute. I'm going to try and I'd like you to see me. How do I do that?
Should be a
If you
camera
would like
icon.
to, if you would like to be seen, I would promote you to a panelist and you will reply. Did you want me to share the item that you sent in while you're speaking, or did you want to share it yourself?
No, that's fine. I would like you to share it.
Okay. Okay, so just look for a prompting. I'm going to promote you to panelist and you should agree to that and it'll bring you over.
Okay.
Okay, and so now that you're here as a panelist, you'll need to unmute yourself once again. And then you can strike the X off of your camera if you'd like to be seen. There
Yep.
you are. We could see you and hear you. Okay, and if you want me to share, you can speak and then tell me when to flip the page or what have you. And you will have 3 minutes, okay? So just a moment. I'm going to get the document up. Give me just a moment, please. Okay, are you able to see?
I am.
Is it the right document?
That's the document with the
Okay.
exhibits.
Okay. Okay, so you can begin speaking and I'll begin the timer. And are both of you going to speak? I see there's someone else with you or
Well, I have a witness.
okay, so you'll have 3 minutes and then that person will have 3 minutes as well.
Oh, and in addition to her, I have a second witness too. But
Oops.
let's
Okay,
just
go ahead.
move on. I get the idea. Let's start off with Exhibit C. Right there. That's it. I'd like to close in on the paragraph that says the tree is in good condition. I don't know. Can you highlight that, what the findings are by an independent licensed arborist?
Mm,
First paragraph.
right in here.
Yes.
And Cerise, can we
Go ahead.
expand the window just to pull that, like in the upper right? Yeah, there you go, here.
Think
So
the-
that it's that rectangle at the top right in the screen. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, oh, perfect.
Okay. Damage from arborist tie was noted in small lateral branches to the tree. Soil samples were taken, moisture was adequate. There's no signs of compaction. Let me move on to the next photograph. There's the buds. Tree is thriving. Next photograph, please. No compaction. And let's move on. Okay, and there's the trunk. Okay, according to urban forest, somehow this tree sustained damage. Could you go through, I think it's several photos now. Go down, keep going. Right, oh, just a second. One more photo, please. The next one, right there. This is when the hearing off, or when the urban forest's party arrived on site. Prior to this, urban forest did not have anybody on site, did not see the scene, and therefore cannot corroborate or authenticate those photographs. They simply do not show what the urban forest is claiming, that there was somehow some kind of damage done to this tree. In addition to that, my witness will testify that the debris was nearby the tree, but it was taken at a skewed angle, and therefore there was nothing there. There was nothing against the tree. So please go to the next photograph.
30 seconds.
I don't understand how a cambrial rupture could happen unless it's something like a cut where it could be done and then come back later on. So that's the first thing. We didn't plant the tree. Urban Forestry planted the tree. We simply started our construction, and the barriers that Urban Forestry stated are 6 feet tall, or ours is 6 feet tall as shown in the plan, but everybody else is on Gary Street and other places in the city are 4 feet tall. So why are there two different standards for certain homeowners and others get to provide tree protection that's at much reduced cost?
Thank
So,
you. That's your time. Did you want to continue, Mr. Reutemann, or go to the next person?
I'd like
How
to,
much more time do you have to make your testimony, Mr. Martinez?
it didn't seem that I got very much in, but I tried to say
Let's
it.
try to do another couple minutes and wrap it up if you don't mind.
I'll okay. Other than let's see. Just give me a quick second. Oh, so the biggest thing is we can't understand, because of the arborist found no findings of damage. Also, there was nothing placed against the tree, so it couldn't have been damaged. This is just pure fiction. And again, my witness will testify that we removed the debris from the area as soon as we were notified. Let's see. Oh, and that's it. I think I've made my point, and the barriers, our barriers is 6 feet tall. Everywhere else in the city, they're 4 feet, and that's a huge cost imposition to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to, before we take the next, your witness testimony, I'd like to just clarify the 4 foot and the 6 foot. That tree protection wasn't in place though when this purported damage from the concrete occurred, right? It was after.
Not only was so we didn't plant the tree, Urban Forest planted it. We did not even know the requirement to provide protection. As soon as we were notified that we were required to provide protection, we went ahead and erected the protection. And again, you're right, we did provide it at 6 feet as they requested, but everywhere else it's at 4 feet. That's all.
Thank you.
And it was not on our plans or permit.
And sorry, just to clarify, you're general contractor for this property?
I'm an engineer. I'm a structural engineer.
Okay,
And
So
and
but
what I
you're
did,
representing the contractor that was doing the work?
it's me and my son. It's me, myself, and I, and we're doing our work. We're just
Gotcha.
a small family, you know, a household trying to build housing for my son and myself.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe the lady, if you, sorry, if you could tell us your name and whatever testimony you want to give.
Yeah, excuse me. Hi, my name's Elaine Doucette. I'm also excuse me, co-owner of the property. And my involvement as far as this particular issue is concerned is that I was there during debris removal, and also the debris was there for all of one day. So, you know, as far as compaction, it would strike me as you know, not very likely that compaction could occur in one day. I was there to help remove the debris, and it was around, but it wasn't touching the tree. And the tree, which, as you know, was pointed out, we didn't plant to begin with. And, you know, we as soon as we were made aware of, you know, the requirement and all that, we attended to it and made sure it all happened. Indeed, as I recall with a conversation with Ms. Mountner, she also expressed surprise that that you know, urban forestry involvement sort of came into play so late in the game, so to speak. So as soon as, you know, we had that conversation, it was productive, everything, you know, transpired to rectify the situation. But the issue at hand being that, yes, there was debris, it wasn't up against the trunk, it was removed right away. Compaction really couldn't occur in, you know, 24, 36 hours. The alleged damage to the tree is such that the arborist that we retained indicated could have happened anytime. It could have happened at time of planting, it could have happened at any time. And so there's really no way of conclusively indicating that the damage is as a result of any items piled up around, you know, the tree. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's really much of anything else to say. So we're hoping that since everything is done there was no malice, there was no, you know, intention to do anything incorrectly. We've been trying to do this all as productively and correctly as possible. You know, the fine I think is
30
misplaced,
seconds.
frankly. Yeah. So thanks for your time, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your honesty and forthcomingness about this. One thing I was confused that Chris said earlier, though, that so the concrete was placed there and then you or someone else from the property took the picture and sent it to the Buff to ask about it. I was just, how is that communicated?
That's exactly what happened. We didn't even know that this was a requirement. We placed the concrete on the outside at the sidewalk and around, you know, and then we sent pictures in And the only reason I sent the pictures in is because we didn't know this was a requirement. We wouldn't have even put it near the tree, but they were working in the street. I have another photograph, but that's what motive, because we had intentionally, we were going to, I rented a debris box and we were going to throw the gravel and the concrete directly into the debris box. But because they were working on a SFPUC project that day, we couldn't put our debris box in the street and remove the concrete. It was there for one day.
Oh, see, this is very useful to understand. So, because I saw the pictures before, there was asphalt and street work. So that's independent of your project.
Correct.
Okay, so your project on your site, you were trying to take debris out to the street, but the street was blocked with a city project. So you stacked it, and during
Right
that
there.
moment, that's when the alleged
Infraction.
damage or violation occurred.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
If you want, I have a picture of the work that was going on in the street. But the truth is, we would have just thrown away everything directly. It's not, efficient to pile stuff up, move it, and drag it forward. We wouldn't have done that. We would have just thrown it away, but we couldn't. We were prevented.
Okay, that's very useful. Yeah, if you have any other photos, you could
Yes.
send them into Cerise and I'll take it in my files when I evaluate.
Would you like to see it now?
You can show it or you can email it to me or
I'll show
email
it
it
to
to
you.
the clerk. That's fine.
And we
Okay.
we have a copy as well, just to
Yeah.
let the customer know that
Okay.
Oh, you have a picture of the.
we do. I believe there's, I think you had provided it with just showing a group of individuals in the street.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely. Thank you.
what happened.
Thank you.
So that does beg the question to Chris, if a property owner or developer is trying to carry out their construction permit, that they have an approved construction permit, and their work is effectively hampered by a city project that constricts their ability to do their work, and their demolition and staging area is taken away. Is that cause for an exception to the requirements? I mean, I know it's a different issue about protecting the tree than the staging area, but effectively what it sounds like to me is this incident would have never occurred if the debris was able to be put in that box that would have been free if the street project wasn't occurring on that day. And my follow-up to that, Chris, is would they still require tree protection if the work they're doing is on the opposite side of the sidewalk on their property and it's just a pathway on their driveway to the street, as opposed to actual construction happening around the tree?
Sure. So I think what urban forestry, our position would be, this is why we require protection, because the public right of way is unpredictable. We don't know. It's a great plan, come in, debris box, remove, pull it away, but things happen. And the reason for the protection is just for this sort of unexpected occurrence. The other thing would be that the tree protection is always required for a street tree at the curb. Most protection would be related to the property owner with work taking place in their property. You could argue that excavation the PUC was making, that they probably should install tree protection as well. So
yeah, I mean, if you have a photo, the photo I looked at, it looked like there was excavation directly adjacent to that tree well, probably to hook up a sewer connection or a main or something, or a lateral. But
that's right. It stops there at the so I think
would the PUC also be under the same triggers to install protection?
Yeah, they are required to install protection as well. But I really appreciate the feedback. Definitely insightful regarding the conflict that occurred. And again, I just note all the things that we acknowledge on this and the responsiveness of the applicant. And just big picture, this is why we require the tree protection. But again, when their project first went through review with building inspection and all that a couple years ago, there was no tree out there. So we do appreciate that, that was
Can I ask a
a
question?
change. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why is the tree protection different from my house than everybody else's? Why is it mine required to be 6 feet and everybody, including your photos, says 4 feet?
So we'll have to check that out.
That's a good thing to check out.
No,
It seems
I-
like there's different requirements in the city.
You know, it'd be helpful for us as we try to respond to that, Mr. Martinez, is if you can send us where the requirement was sent to you, saying 6 feet, so that we can look into that.
Oh, Urban Forestry showed a picture of it. That's their standard. In the exhibits that they provided,
So 6 feet is the standard, is that right, Chris?
that's what he showed.
I'm just distracted by some comments in the webinar chat. I just want our team to delete their comments. It's not really helpful. I just want to say tree protection is required. And, you know, I'm not going to apologize for issuing a citation when their protection was not in place. 4 feet, 6 feet, all we care about is that there's a sign that someone is trying to protect a small vulnerable tree. We can have a debate about 4 feet or 6 feet. We would never cite someone for failing to protect a tree with 4 feet level of protection. So I'm not going to get zinged here whether it's 4 feet or 6 feet. We need protection measures in place. We totally appreciate that you've installed it and we're extremely responsive. We will issue a fine every day we see a pile of debris like that within a tree basin. It's going to happen. Expect that.
Okay.
You didn't see the pile of debris. You didn't arrive until after.
No, yeah, and I'm not here to debate. I just want to defend our department, and we will issue a fine any and every day we see a pile of debris like that in a tree basin, PUC or private property owner. But again, robust conversation. I want to thank you and the hearing officer for really getting into the details, because I think we're on agreement in about 99% of this, but
We're getting into the weeds and
No,
into the
yeah.
tree well.
no, I don't want to say, I want to thank you again. You've been incredibly responsive.
Yeah.
Once we issue
I
the
appreciate your
fine,
testimony.
no, and I understand why. If I get a parking ticket, I'm upset, and one this large is, I understand. So
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to voice my concerns and raise my issues at this hearing. And I'll be requesting a copy of the hearing so that I can move along with this.
Yeah, we'll definitely send you the findings. Thank you.
Thank you.
You said that there was a second person that you wanted to have testimony, is that?
I do. His name is Carlos Covarrubias, and he should be there.
Okay, just a moment. I'm going to change your role back to attendee, and then
you.
I will bring up, give Carlos time to speak. Mr. Carlos, are you able to unmute yourself and speak?
Yeah.
Would you like to be promoted to a panelist so that you can
No,
share your
it's okay.
screen, or are you just speaking?
I'm just speaking. Yeah, I don't have.
Okay.
any.
Okay, so go ahead and then I will begin the timer when you start.
My name is Carlos Covarrubias. I'm employed by Alfred. That day we just removed debris, transported it over to the sidewalk, nowhere near the tree. It was maybe about a foot, maybe 16 inches away from the actual actual tree trunk. Nothing actually impacted or touched the tree itself. It didn't even touch the stakes that were placed around the tree itself. So damage to the tree, it's just not possible that we caused anything like that. Again, it was just stacked near it, not against it. The pictures obviously at an angle show that there might be contact with the trunk itself, but absolutely no. I was actually the one that was moving the concrete there, and I did not lean anything against the trunk itself. That's pretty much all I have to say. I don't know if you have any questions or.
I appreciate your testimony. We'll take it into consideration. If there's any other photos that support your position on the fact that the stones were not touching the tree, that would be helpful, because the picture looks different from what I saw, but I hear what you're saying, and I'll consider that, because I didn't see it with my own eyes, as your colleague mentioned. So I'll have to rely on the testimony and the photos that we do see. But I appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else present at the hearing that wants to give testimony on this case?
I see no, excuse me, I see no other hands at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone that provided information and on this, and we'll move to hearing order number 211489 at 801 Sanchez.
Good morning. This is Chris Buck again with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. I do want to make a note. Our clerk, Cerise Waiters, who's hosting the meeting today, noticed that I had a typo in the opening page of our PowerPoint where the year said 2024. So I've corrected that. But indeed, this is March 19th, 2025. So thank you, Cerise. So with that, let me screen share again. With luck, we can do this expeditiously and without too much trouble. So let me move this, advance this, hold on. Okay. Thank you everyone who's joined us today. So this is regarding 801 Sanchez, order number 211489, to consider an appeal for the illegal removal of one significant tree on the property of 801 Sanchez Street. The fine issued is $10,000. This citation is going to have a lot of moving pieces. So I just think I want to, in advance, just thank everyone for all the work they put into it. And there'll definitely be ample time to get into the details. The subject tree that the fine was issued for is pictured here in this Google Street View image from February 2021. The subject tree was on private property. It's a Monterey pine tree, Pinus radiata. This is at the corner. This is the 21st Street frontage of a corner property at 801 Sanchez. This is an image of the site from either Google or one of our inspector's photos from April 2022, likely Google based on the image angle. And a little bit of site history. There's a couple of permits that we'll reference during this morning's hearing, again, showing the subject tree is the Monterey pine tree above the retaining wall on the 21st Street frontage of the property. Obviously, it's a very large tree, a Monterey pine, and we'll get into more of the site specifics. We actually did have 2 tree hearings at this site, which is not unusual, but we had a street tree removal for the trees pictured here. We also had a tree removal permit process for significant trees on private property at this address. And I have a slide that spells out those dates and timelines. In April 2022, this is an image of the site. The street trees are still in place, but the tree and property is no longer visible. The landscape plans that are included in some of the permits that we reviewed. Part of this, there's a few different diagrams, and the applicant has provided a number of additional materials, which they'll provide today, and we'll make sure that you have as the hearing officer following the hearing. One of the things I wanted to point out, what we're really going to get into today with this case is how do we define what a significant tree is? And I'd like to get to a better image here. When they applied to remove significant trees along the 21st Street frontage of the property, those trees were clearly within 10 feet of the right-of-way, recognized as such by the applicant, and submitted a permit for removal. We reviewed them, and because of construction impacts, it was clear that the significant trees they apply to remove, we would approve with replacement. A couple of years later, because of grade changes and changes to slope, the street trees were going to be heavily impacted. We issued a tree removal permit for the removal of the street trees. One challenge here is that the base of the trunk appears to be within private property, we know that, but the base of the trunk does appear to be beyond the 10-foot significant tree criteria. The challenge for us is that our code defines a significant tree very expansively. It says a tree with any portion of its trunk within 10 feet of the public right-of-way. So this is a case of a tree that its trunk is beyond the 10-foot public right-of-way significant tree criteria, but its trunk does have a lean towards the public right-of-way, which would therefore make it count as a significant tree. On top of all that, we had both a significant tree removal hearing in 2020 and a street tree removal hearing in 2023, 2024. And the status of the tree as a significant tree never came up. The original permit in 2020 didn't identify it as a significant tree. It just said, large mature tree to be protected during construction. And when we did the street tree removal, the street trees, the significant tree had already been removed, and it did not come to the attention of that inspector as a particular issue, as she was there to evaluate street trees for removal. What happened is that when the job card sign-off was being sought earlier this year or late last year, the inspector assigned was doing her due diligence to just catch herself up on the site history, noticed this large tree, and the first thought was, well, what if this lien made it significant? We didn't have time to go through several years of permit history on that. So to be consistent with how we handled similar cases, we issued the fine for illegal removal of one significant tree. So that's just some general background as we wade into the details on this. Again, this shows the trunk of the tree being, just beyond 10 feet of the public right-of-way. This particular diagram shows a portion of the trunk being within 10 feet of the public right-of-way. This survey map provided by the applicant shows a portion of the trunk potentially within 9.75 feet of the right-of-way, with the base edge is more than 10 feet. So there are some conflicting documents that we have in our files that potentially show the base of the tree as being within 10 feet of the right-of-way. That is something that our inspector noticed. So regarding our code, if the base of the tree is measured to be 10.71 feet from the public right-of-way, but the trunk, however, has a lean, that brings the trunk closer to the public right-of-way. This ordinance was created in 2007, and very quickly we recognized how expansive it was. And so we asked our advice attorney how to interpret our code. And not to be in any way humorous, but the legal finding, or at least the advice attorney said, the way this is written, I would interpret it as extending from the center of the earth up through the heavens. What that means is you could have a rooftop tree on a 3rd or 4th floor balcony that meets a significant tree criteria because it's within 10 feet of a public right-of-way. This also just means that if a tree leans and its trunk is within 10 feet of the right-of-way, even if the trunk itself is beyond, it will qualify as a significant tree. Again, just going back to our 2020 permit process to remove other significant trees in the property, you can see on their plans, it says existing Monterey pine tree to remain. This is in the upper left corner of the rectangle. So again, they had a protection plan. It stated it would remain. It really didn't come up in 2020. In our code, we talk about, we've covered this at the early part of the hearing, but in addition to when an abutting property owner has removed a tree or trees without a permit, the department shall require that the property owner plant replacement street tree or trees with total diameter 6 inches above ground that is equal to or greater than the total diameter of the street tree or trees that were removed without a permit. So the trunk diameter, the DBH as recorded, is 52 inches. We don't know what it was measured at 6 inches above grade, but what this is saying is that there's the fine for the illegal removal, but if upheld, the requirement is also to replace 52 inches worth of trunk diameter with a single tree, which is nearly impossible, or with a number of other replacements. I do want to go into the permit history at this site because I think it's absolutely relevant, and I think it in some ways is a way to help the property owner. So the background urban forestry permit and inspection history for this site, we did review and approve significant trees in the property for removal and replacement in 2020. A public hearing was held. Buff staff did review and approve a street tree removal application in the years 2023 and 2024. After this fine was issued in December and it was appealed, the urban forester, that was me, reviewed both hearings on the Public Works YouTube channel to help determine what information or conversations about the subject tree occurred. For instance, I was listening to our 2 previous YouTube hearings to understand if I or someone else from my team stated that this tree was or was not significant would really help us in this appeal process. In both hearings, the first hearing referenced it as just an existing tree to remain. Its status as a significant tree or not was not discussed. And then the hearing that occurred in 2023, 2024, that subject tree, even though not shown in photos, clearly missing, was not discussed in any way. These are to get into the permit details, these are the details here. The 2020 hearing occurred on September 3rd, 2020 with a permit, and this was regarding a permit to remove other significant trees on the property. In 2023, 2024, street trees were removed with a permit with replacement that also required a hearing, and that hearing was on February 7th, 2024. That was staffed by Sarah Stacy, an urban forestry inspector. Now, I will say that if a tree-related violation had occurred on a site, typically staff would have noted this history at that time in preparation for the hearing on February 7th, 2024. What I'm saying here is that I am completely understanding of the applicant and their very lengthy appeal response, that it doesn't feel like double or triple jeopardy here. We've had a number of different inspectors process applications, and at no time prior to issuing the fine did the tree's status as a significant tree or not come up or was questioned. And then another thing, I wasn't able to pull up, but the original checklist form required for tree protection and to determine how many new street trees a project requires, typically will have an affidavit that states what trees are going to be protected, like street trees or significant trees, and or other trees that are going to be protected on site. That's another opportunity for staff to find that a tree that may be considered in property and not protected as a significant tree is actually a significant tree. So I'm bringing this up because when we issued this fine in December, the applicant was just seeking their job card to close out this multi-year construction process on site. The inspector at the time, doing her own due diligence, pulled up Google Street View, saw the size of the tree, went through the permit history, saw there were plans that said it would remain. No discussion about its status as a significant tree. She felt it was important to handle the matter in the way that we've consistently handled it, which is if you see something, say something, and be consistent with how we've handled similar cases. So she did issue the fine for removal without a permit. That said, even if we issue a fine, we're not here to stand behind a barricade and say that by any means we can't have a discussion about the circumstances around that. And that's why I've really gone through a lot of this information. This application process did involve a number of different inspectors, and as you can see, multiple tree permits were already issued at this site. So I do want to say that I think there's some lessons learned from staff here regarding when someone initiates the removal of a tree. Typically, it is our standard operating procedure to just review the other trees. Is this tree significant? Is it not? Now is the time while we're reviewing a permit to confirm that. And I think there were some missed opportunities by our staff to make a note of that. And now I'm going to conclude in just a couple of minutes, but this is something that I wanted to emphasize. In our code, Article 16 of the Public Works Code, we define a significant tree. It states on privately owned property with any portion of its trunk within 10 feet of a public right-of-way. That is incredibly expansive. It doesn't say where to measure. It doesn't say base of the tree's trunk. It doesn't talk about how do you apply this if there's multiple stems of a tree. It is incredibly expansive. Now, regarding the other criteria, there's a size criteria. Of course, the tree was large enough to meet any of the three. You only need to meet one of the three criteria. So for sure, yes, the trunk diameter is greater than 12 inches at 4.5 feet above grade. The height greater than 20 feet, canopy in excess of 15 feet wide. So yes, if determined to be within 10 feet of the public right-of-way, the size criteria is not in question. The issue is with a base of the trunk beyond 10 feet of the right-of-way, the way our code is written is incredibly expansive, and most trees on private property do lean towards the street where there aren't buildings blocking light. So trees naturally grow out towards the public right-of-way. And one other important note, whenever we don't advise property owners on street trees that are not within our, or significant trees that are not within our jurisdiction. But just generically, if you were to have a backyard private property dispute with a neighbor, typically you would determine the location of a tree where the base of the tree's trunk originates on the property at grade. And so I want to acknowledge that I think most people here acknowledge that to determine where the placement of a tree is, generally is where that tree originates from the grade within a property line. Unfortunately, the Public Works Code is very expansive, and it means that you can have the trunk of the tree be beyond 10 feet, but with the lean of the tree come within 10 feet of a public right-of-way. Now, here's one more very important thing that I wanted to point out, is that in preparation for the hearing, I reviewed our website. This is probably the most information we can provide to the public about what a significant tree is or is not. And I want to say that I found a little bit lacking in detail. This is why. On our website at this address, we have a page for significant and landmark trees. It talks about how our code was amended in 2007, was revised to protect certain trees on private property that are close to the public right-of-way. Then our website goes on to define significant trees, and it says significant trees are on private property and within 10 feet of the public right-of-way, and also meet one of the following size requirements. The one thing that to me is a bit of a glaring omission, and I think we need to change immediately, is that it doesn't say any portion of the tree's trunk, because that is that's the key information that's going to help prevent this sort of confusion and problems in the future. It states significant trees are on private property and within 10 feet of the right-of-way. We really do need to state more clearly what it says in the ordinance, which, if we could just go back, states explicitly with any portion of its trunk within 10 feet of the right-of-way. So our process here is to be consistent with how we handled similar cases. Issue fines to be consistent with how we apply the code, how it's written. And sometimes it's a little messy, and I wish we didn't have so much previous contact and never have the issue come up before. In our defense, the tree had been shown on plans as existing and to be protected. One last thing I did is I checked our application. Again, I'm here to try to address these issues and view this from the applicant's perspective. Nowhere on our application for a permit to remove a tree, a street tree or a significant tree, does it state again any portion of the tree's trunk. So not on the application itself does it have in fine print anywhere the definition of a tree having any portion of its trunk within the right-of-way. Lastly, I'll just close by saying that tree contractors ultimately are responsible for understanding the municipality's code where they work. Some are incredibly expansive. For example, our significant tree ordinance in San Francisco. Every city and town has an ordinance, and they are different. They may range from species to species with different size criteria. So it is very common for tree contractors to carry with them either printouts and updating those from time to time, or accessing a municipality's website to confirm how a city determines when a code does require or does not require a permit. Now, this may mean that maybe a consultant who's very professional and well-known states to a contractor, this tree is not significant, no permits needed to remove it. That tree contractor needs to do their own due diligence. They can't just take someone's word for it. Ultimately, the contractor who removes the tree is responsible for answering to whether or not a tree was significant. That's just a gentle reminder out there. Again, many municipalities define a tree and or trees in different ways. And it's all depends on how it's defined in their ordinance. With that said, I've covered a lot of ground. The applicant or representative has been very patient. We've had a robust dialogue. I want to repeat a couple things. The applicant or property owner has been incredibly responsive to this fine. They sent us a detailed, thoughtful response with additional information. I know there's a lot of information provided prior to the hearing, but there was also additional materials provided which may not yet be in your possession as the hearing officer. So there'll need to be some additional review of that following the hearing, which is pretty typical. But I just wanted to explain the background to this. We recognize how many times we were involved at this site, and at no time did the status of the tree as significant come up. I'm not here to deny that. I respectfully kind of close out our testimony, but to be consistent with how we handled other cases, if an inspector sees something and they have a job card sign off coming up, even if they feel like it's not clean and it's going to raise a lot of questions, ultimately they have the authority to just go ahead and issue an administrative penalty. And this here is the process for unpacking what occurred. And so I hope my testimony was meant to be helpful towards the applicant, that we recognize a number of moving pieces here. I think we share some responsibility in what led to this. And I wanted to state that up front. Thank you.
Mr. Reutemann, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you, Chris, for the detailed testimony, and I look forward to hearing the appellant's testimony on this.
Yes, we have Eric Jacobs. Eric, would you like me to promote you to panelist, or did you want to just speak this morning?
Yeah, please promote me to panelist. Thank you. I have a couple of exhibits I'd like to share. Thank you. And I just want to start by saying thanks, Chris. I really appreciate the thought and effort you put into your presentation. There's a lot there, and you've been very responsive and communicative and helping kind of put this together with us. So thanks for that. And yeah, when you're ready.
Okay, so just look for a prompt that you'll answer. Okay, now that you've come over, you'll need to unmute yourself once more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Eric Jacobs, and I am here on behalf of the project sponsors for 801 Sanchez Street to represent the appeal and our request for reconsideration of BUF's citation associated with significant tree removal without the benefit of a permit. The permitting and construction of 801 Sanchez has been ongoing since 2019. Over this period, the project underwent numerous neighborhood notification processes, public hearings, and extensive community outreach. In fact, the project applied for 2 rounds of tree removals, which were granted, and had 2 prior tree hearings. The project put forth its best efforts to save the Monterey pine in question by protecting it in place during the first year of construction and hiring an extremely qualified arborist, Roy Leggett, to assess and make recommendations on the best approach for the tree. In the end, it was determined that due to the following factors, it was a candidate for removal. The first, per California law and per the property survey, the tree was located on private property 10 feet, about 10.71 feet from the property line and outside DPW jurisdiction. DPW never measured the lien and is inferring from photos that the lien on the tree placed the tree in the right-of-way in contrast to the survey. And I just wanted to respond to a comment you made about conflicting documentation, Chris, that the landscape plan showed the tree closer to the property line than the survey. So it's not uncommon for landscape plans to have sort of a standard of accuracy that wouldn't equal that of a survey. And for surveyors to use a landscape plan as a site plan for kind of reference and background when showing their measurements. so that the tick marks and the actual physical measurements on the plan are where the surveyor is indicating the base of the trunk to start, whereas the background drawings are only reference for showing generally what's there, not precisely what's there. So we're not looking at like architectural level plans where, as they would be scaled, you would see exactly where that tree's base would fall. The survey shows that, and those indications in the letter provided by the surveyor attest to that, but it isn't meant to be read, oh, see, look, the landscaper thought it was here and the surveyor thought it was there. It's kind of a resolution of drawings issue as opposed to inconsistencies on plans. So I just wanted to clear that up. Okay, and then second, the tree had a significant lean towards the roadway, which is in question, but it posed a hazard to public safety because of that lean. It damaged
30 seconds.
the retaining wall, and I hope you guys will give me some extra time here. It had damaged the retaining wall, and based on that, it actually had a net negative value per industry standards. And then three, the tree had a bark beetle infestation present in the lower 8 feet of the trunk root crown and was unhealthy, and also because of that had an appraised value of near zero. When these recommendations were understood and taken into consideration, the contractor for the project sent out a public notification to adjacent neighbors explaining that the tree was going to be removed, and we received no additional comment or concerns from the public. During
Excuse me, that is your time. Mr. Reutemann, did you want him to continue or?
Yeah, I feel like this one warrants a little extra time, so
Okay.
maybe we could.
Do you
keep
want me
going.
to set a timer or just let it go?
You think you can wrap it up in 3 minutes?
Yeah, I can. 3 minutes should be fine, and you
Let's-
guys can ask me
all right.
other questions you have.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, no problem. During the original public outreach for the entitlement of the new building, there was concerns about the tree. So we addressed those concerns and communicated. And then when we communicated back to the public about the condition of the tree and sent out letters, there was no further concern. The tree was removed in 2021, at the end of 2021, when we were having all of that terrible weather that year, and the project marched along into its completion. Over this period of time, there were additional tree removal hearings and numerous BUF inspections on site to verify the improvements along the extensive property frontages at 21st and Sanchez. During this time, no comment was made by the 3 prior BUF inspectors. It was not until the final inspection that a 4th BUF inspector, who was up until that point unfamiliar with the project history, visited the site and made the determination that the Monterey pine had been removed 3 years earlier. Determination that the Monterey pine, which had been removed 3 years earlier, surveyed by a licensed surveyor and determined to be non-significant at the time, was in fact, based on her evaluation of historical photos, potentially a significant tree. And this was based on a lean towards the right-of-way. This determination came as a great shock to the property owners, who thought they had been conscientious stewards of their property and were adhering to strict compliance. It is our position that the tree citation was issued in error, and that the property owner should be granted relief from all fines and citations associated with the removal based on the tree's location, condition, and the manner in which the project was handled by BUF staff. Furthermore, the sponsor team has improved the project frontage and rear yard open space with extensive plantings on and around the site, and I'll move through my what I'm showing. This was what was sent to us by BUF. Here's the prior to construction conditions up here along the frontage, and then after construction, we've got numerous trees. We planted 20 trees on the site, both on and around the site, some in 72-inch, 60-inch, 48-inch balls, and then lots of improvements along the site. It was mentioned by Chris that we had to change grading when we were doing our DPW permitting. We had to go through DAC, Disabled Access Commission,
30 seconds.
requested that we make extensive improvements along the site to get ADA compliance on 21st Street, one of the steepest streets in the city, which forced rebuilding of these walls. It was over $500,000 in improvements that had to be made in order to do that, which is what facilitated needing to replace the street trees, which we did. And then we planted a number of additional olive trees out on the Sanchez side. So there was really an incredible amount of biomass that went back onto this site.
That's your time.
And a lot of work that was done for the public's benefit. Thank you.
Thank
Available
you,
for any
Eric.
question.
Yeah, I do have one question, and that you mentioned early about when the tree, it sounds like at one point you tried to protect the tree early on, and then
We did.
at some point it changed to feeling like it wasn't able to be protected, or the infestation, or the reasons you mentioned that it was appropriate to come out, and then you did public outreach to your neighbors with no objections. But was there any contact at that time when the change from protecting the tree to removing it, that you reached out to Buff to seek their blessing on that change?
You know, during that time, we didn't reach out to Buff to seek their blessing. And the reason why was because we were under the impression it was not a significant tree. We consulted our arborist, Roy Leggett. We discussed whether or not this was a significant tree. We felt it was an emergency based on so I'll share this. When we tried to protect it in place, you can see the protections around the tree to keep people away from it at the time when we were excavating to support that sideline retaining wall because it needed shoring based on its conditions. Here's the tree in place. You can see the lean, and you can see sort of the excavations that are occurring and the nice barrier we made around the tree to protect it. Here you can see us working on that sideline retaining wall. And their original recommendations were, hey, well, we can put some cabling on the tree with some, a significant foundation in the ground to keep it from listing even further because the retaining wall was cracking. And with, in the kind of the record, we had the Orville Dam up in Northern California and all those rains going on. There was a lot of concern about the weather. Even though this was a beautiful day in San Francisco in the photos. What we were told was we could support the tree in place, but the long-term effect of a tree with a bark beetle infestation with a significant lean is that it's going to further weaken the tree when you support it. So you put in the big foundation, you put the cabling in place, and the long-term effect of that is that the tree gets weaker and weaker. I'm no arborist. That's just what I'm regurgitating from the information that was given to us by our professionals. And I don't know if Roy's on the line right now, if he maybe was going to be able to call in, but he was going to be in a place where there's poor service. So I don't know if he was able to make it today. But that was considered. And, based on then having the survey information showing the location of the trunk of the tree outside the radius deeming significance, we made the decision to remove it, based on what we saw in the field. And I do understand the more nuanced definition now. I've been educated that it lies kind of embedded into the Public Works Code, that the significant tree definition is more complicated than what the website and application materials demonstrate. But based on that, we felt like we could remove it like any other tree that was located on private property in need of emergency removal.
Mr. Reutman, we do have Mr. Leggett here today, and he has his hand raised. Do you want him to speak separately, or do you want me to add him into this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, if you can provide additional testimony, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Unmute. Hi, this is Roy Leggett. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Reutman, would you like me to continue with a response to your pending question?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to do is gather as much information about the circumstances. There's multiple things that we're discussing. I don't necessarily want to get into analyzing the tree trunk height above the street and the diameter from the, you know, the trunk, and that stuff that's already
Yeah.
been pretty well discussed. But what I want to try to understand is your assessment of the tree condition. And then I'm going to square that with Chris after to get his expert opinion on whether that will warrant a tree removal approval or not. So why don't you tell me,
Okay.
you know, what Eric explained about this, that you could only save this tree by putting cables on it or something? Is that?
Well, yeah, well, you know, the idea of putting in guying cables to hold a tree of this size up was not a recommendation that came from me, although I did hear that it had been theorized as maybe a way to keep the tree around by someone else. The industry standard that we have for supplemental supportive trees includes guying systems, but we can't guy trees of the diameter and scale and magnitude of this tree with our industry standard hardware. We don't have any way to do that. So I would not be willing or able to do this per industry standards as a guying process. The excavation on the north side of the tree necessitated for wall repairs. That was just a few feet from the stem of the tree, or the trunk of the tree, and extended down about 10 feet deep. And all of the roots there had already been cut off when I saw the tree. And I think that it was out of necessity, not because anybody was trying to hurt this tree, but they had no choice but to excavate in order to do the wall repairs. When it comes to the lean of the tree, that was concerning to me. And it was also concerning to me that there were bark beetles in the lower 8 feet of the trunk and in the root collar area of the tree. And there also was pine pitch canker in the upper canopy or outer canopy. What we see with pine pitch canker and the red turpentine bark beetle is a pest and a disease that work in a complex to kill these trees. So one weakens the tree by boring into it and is attracted to the sap that's exuded by the other. So the fungus, which is pine pitch canker, bleeds sap out of the tree. That attracts bark beetles, and bark beetles bore into it and girdle it and kill it from the base. It's a widespread problem that's been happening for over 30 years as a disease and pest complex. Pine pitch canker was introduced to California almost 40 years ago now from the American South, and it's created a serious problem for this species of tree. So anyway, I think Eric covered the legal basis in terms of California state law pretty well. The state laws that regulate tree ownership, or who owns a tree and what the jurisdiction is, that was established in 1872 in California and has been confirmed by every county throughout the state through superior courts as well as state courts on appeals thousands of times since 1872. It's consistent, my experience with the the public workshop participation process in the early 2000s that was run by Hort Science on behalf of the city and county of San Francisco. Before this ordinance was passed, it based the regulation of trees on where the trunk met the ground. That was our discussion. I was at those workshops, and that's consistent with state law. The broader interpretation that has been adopted recently by Bureau of Urban Forestry and the city attorney is inconsistent with our workshops and inconsistent with state law. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you for that. Sorry, this is so fascinating. I would like to ask one more question about this. Is
Sure.
this tree of an age that you can, I mean, obviously the tree's gone now, but is this tree, given the beetle infestation and the pitch pine, like what would if we were able to somehow magically preserve the tree with the appropriate guying and retention and support structures. Would this tree be a candidate that would keep going for a significant time, or is it in decline where all you'd be doing is buying another year or something of life on this tree? I don't know if that's something you can speculate on or not.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a great question, Mr. Raithman. A Monterey pine of this size and kind of an open branch structure where it's losing its interior and secondary branching and finer branches and the canopy's thinning out. These trees are categorically called over mature trees. So we have young, mature, and over mature as our general age classifications. And this would be an over mature tree. So it's at a point where it's in decline. And whether this tree is going to survive for a couple of years or 10 years, I couldn't say. We aren't that predictive, but with a pest and disease complex like red turpentine bark beetles and pine pitch canker acting on the tree, it could be short term or it could be a slightly longer term, but it's still an over mature tree with a decline pattern.
Thank you. And sorry, my last question, that you mentioned those state statutes about the measurement being at the base. So assuming that, I mean, obviously that's something that we still have to follow the city's requirements regardless of what, every other county is doing, because we're San Francisco, we don't do what every other county does. As I'm sure you're very familiar, but you're contending that at the base, at the soil, is where any measurement for classifying whether it's in the right of way or not would be measured. Is that right?
Well, I understand. San Francisco has unique ordinances and doesn't necessarily have to conform with state law. The precedent, however, for who owns a tree is also set by San Francisco County Superior Court, because I've testified in those trials. And I know that to be a fact because there are ownership issues that I've been weighing in on. And it's based on where the trunk meets the ground. When it comes to how the ordinance is interpreted, I think that the breadth of interpretation that Mr. Buck conveyed is, well, I'll put it this way, it's news to me. I've never heard this until this case. First of all, a leaning tree is notably at a higher risk for uprooting. In fact, it may be partially uprooted to be leaning. So regulating and protecting those trees in the interest of public benefit is a specious argument. The public benefit is gone if the tree is hazardous. It's now a public liability. So I think that there's just a little bit of disconnect on the way the ordinance is being interpreted or applied.
Thank you. And is that, maybe that's a question for Chris, but is it measured to the closest outside extremity of the bark, or is it to the center line of the tree?
The way I interpret property lines and the way that the court systems have always interpreted it is if there's any part of where the trunk meets the soil that overlaps a property line, that becomes a boundary tree. And I think you'll see that both in precedent cases or in cases that have been heard as well as appealed, as well as if you just read the 1872 laws that are pretty simple, straightforward. That's the way that the industry broadly interprets and applies regulatory status or ownership status on trees. It's the way the industry works. So sure, San Francisco can be an outlier. I admit that. Okay. There's no question about that. But anyway, I think holding the contractor somehow feet to the fire, like Chris suggested, it's supportable. What he said is supportable by way of contractor license law, that the contractor is responsible for getting their permits in place. But at the same time, the industry has industry practice that also prevails. So I think it's also somewhat arguable that the contractor's actions are consistent with the industry, whatever that means. So with all due respect.
Thank you. One other thing that comes to mind in looking at that photo, obviously, digging in front of the tree and around the roots can further erode or damage a tree. That's common sense. But you were saying that excavation was basically a requirement of the project. Was that the retaining wall that was necessitated by the ADA upgrade requirements that required that excavation in front of the lean of that tree?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that is well, it's related to creating a structural wall where the wall was already failing, and then you have to get the load removed from the wall if you're going to preserve it or reinforce it or replace it. So whatever the action was, I can't speak to how the construction proceeded precisely. I wasn't part of that, but I did see the excavation, and I understand the necessity when you have a retaining wall.
Yeah, I'm
Roy,
just
I can-
curious if
I
the
can speak to
permit,
that.
yeah, maybe Eric, you could advise on the sequencing.
Yeah.
Was that permit showing that retaining wall was going to be dug out and replaced?
Yeah, so we had DBI permits to not to replace the retaining wall, but to structurally support it. Not only was there a need to place guardrails along that wall for fall protection along the property line, because the actual grade of the yard, as you saw in some of the earlier photos I showed, is up at the tree base level. So we have a condition where 21st Street is 17, 18 feet lower than the grade of the yard itself. So that large retaining wall is actually retaining the grade of the yard much higher above where that tree was set. That and in part because of the age of the retaining wall, in part because of the way it was built, and in part because of the tree and its lean, the retaining wall was failing, and there was large visible cracking along the face of that wall. As well, the way the wall was originally built was that the sidewalk actually buttressed the base of the retaining wall, and the bottom of the retaining wall was only a few inches below the sidewalk level. So that when DPW required us to build a new sidewalk, an ADA compliant sidewalk, requiring the back of walk to be lowered 13 inches, the lowering of the sidewalk for accessibility to create that sub 2% cross slope required by city standards required us lowering that back of walk and undermining the wall. So when the wall became undermined, it was necessary to incorporate a whole lot more structural support into that wall to bring it up to current load standards. So all of that work is kind of interconnected, but we had multiple conditions requiring upgrades to the wall.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So if I could just paraphrase, the wall in its existing condition was already potentially substandard, but when you basically made the wall taller by lowering the sidewalk grade, mandatory lowering of the sidewalk grade, that necessitated a strengthened or a replaced wall to support the yard above.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I think that's
so there's no way to
close
put
enough.
that in without potentially undermining the support or the restraining soil around that root ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that interstitial space in between the tree root and the wall itself needed to be excavated out to give enough working clearance for the contractor to support the wall, which, given the height of that wall and the location of the street beneath it, was an important kind of public safety, life safety thing to do. As well, we went many rounds with DPW to try and avoid lowering the back of walk, and tried many creative ways of kind of reconstructing the street such that we could do that. But in the end, Disabled Access Commission required us to provide a compliant sidewalk there and lower that back of walk, and that precipitated all that work, as well as kind of the need for that kind of tiered planter that you see there, that's in place right now. That's actually additional structural support to buttress the base of the wall, so that we could have working clearances to get very deep piers in to support that grade, because the amount of work required to support a wall of that height is huge. It's an impressive engineering feat that had to be done there.
Well, I appreciate the clarification. Chris, I think you know what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you if we could get in a time machine and go back to the moment that they identified that this tree needed to be removed to build that wall, and had, say, reached out to Buff properly and submitted a tree removal permit based on the arborist's identification of the need to remove it structurally and all the infestation and age and so forth. Regardless of whether it was indeed, on the city's right of way or not, would Buff have approved that for removal?
It's a great question. I think in some ways it depends maybe on when the process was engaged, but ultimately I do agree with Mr. Leggett's description of the tree as, over mature, senescing is another word, meaning it's mature and it's actually in a state of decline or slow decline. The citation of beetles, bark beetles, and probably the beginnings of pitch canker in the canopy is consistent with a tree that's reached its max size, more or less, and is beginning to decline. The excavation, it looked like some of the roots were intact, but perhaps not all the roots were intact. If the roots were cut already, that would certainly lead to an approval because of structural stability of the tree. If our review is prior to the root pruning, it would definitely be a consideration. Our preference would be to retain the tree until the canopy is showing severe decline. But that would change if there's tree root removal, substantial removal. So it's a great question. One other thing I will point out is a way to deflect answering that question with a definitive, because I think that's hard to say, because our staff recommendation is also just the beginning of a process that could include a public works hearing and Board of Appeals. I can confirm that while this tree was very large visually, we did not receive any calls or complaints from the public asking about its status, of a protected status or not. So again, I do want to say that corroborates that clearly they did do a number of steps to outreach to the property owners, because we never received a complaint as far as I could tell. And just to close out my thoughts on some of this, to confirm, we do not have precise measurements of that lien. So we don't have that level of documentation to support the fine from a definitive, here's the lien angle, and this is what we believe to be within our jurisdiction. Again, they did obtain all other permits with us in a very more than adequate way, both as a tree removal, street tree removal, significant tree removal, and even a landscaping permit. And in no time did our staff counter the assumption or assertion or statement that this tree was not significant. And I think we have some responsibility to acknowledge on that. And then lastly, I do want to point out, I think this particular case has brought to my attention that we really need to add more specificity to our website and our application. Because honestly, I would expect someone to review an application and our website for guidance on removal of significant trees. And I was surprised this morning when I found that it doesn't reference that key section, any portion of the tree's trunk. We really need to include that on the application and the website, because otherwise we're asking someone to dig into the code. I would not search code in another jurisdiction. I would look at their website. So I do want to say that it's a little late in the process, but I think that that's something we need to address right away. So those are my primary points. I kind of wanted to I appreciate all the time and energy that everyone's put into this case. And again, I acknowledge that issuing the fine years into the process likely was shocking and certainly it's not necessarily a good look for us, but our inspector felt that they had no choice based on what they saw.
Thank you. Eric, if you have those photos and you haven't already sent those to Buff, can you send those to Cerise Waiters, and then I can keep those in my files when I review this, because I'm going to have to spend some time re-reviewing the documents to really dig into this one.
Yeah, we did provide those photos
Okay.
to the team. The only photos you guys don't have are the photos of what we planted after. So if you want photos of just what the rear yard looks like now,
Yeah, that'd be
and
helpful.
I'll send that along. Great.
Yes, please. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else from the owner's representation that wants to give testimony?
No, I think we're good on that. You guys have been generous with your time and your consideration, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if there's any questions or any files you feel like you're not able to find.
Thank you. And then is there anyone else on the hearing that wants to give testimony on this case?
No other hands at this time.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your detailed testimonies, and I think that concludes this case, and also that's the last one on the docket, so that concludes the hearing. We'll close the hearing now. Thank you.